All Hallowtide is the Western Christian season encompassing the Triduum, a religious observance lasting 3 days. Including All Saints' Eve, Halloween, All Saints' Day, All Hallows, and All Souls' Day, as well as the International Day of Prayer for the Persecuted Church, observed on the first Sunday of November, and Remembrance Sunday, observed on the second Sunday in November, in some traditions. The period begins on the 31st of October annually. All Hallowtide is a time to remember the dead, including martyrs, saints, and all faithful departed Christians. The present date of Hallowmas, All Saints' Day, and thus also of its vigil, Halloween, was established for Rome perhaps by Pope Gregory III, 731 to 741, and was made of obligation throughout the Frankish Empire by Louis the Pious in 835. Elsewhere, other dates were observed even later, with the date in Ireland being the 20th of April. In the early 11th century, the modern date of All Souls' Day was popularized, after Abbot Odilo established it as a day for the monks of Cluny and associated monasteries to pray for the dead. The end of October and early November have always been dense with symbolical significance in quite a surprising number of traditions inherited from former times. We in the modern Western world have seen a revival in the observance and celebration of Halloween, originating from a Celtic festival of the dead and a remembrance of ancestors who came before. Contemporary ideas take away the meaning of Halloween beyond that of an excuse for kids to gorge themselves on candy, as well as adults, to have an excuse to dress up in costumes and party. There was a piece in the Parade magazine in 2010 that exemplified this reductionist view quite efficaciously. The article was entitled Lessons from the Great Pumpkin. This, of course, was a reference to the make-believe character imagined by Linus in the Peanuts comic strip. In the year 1859, Robert Grant Halliburton was visiting England and decided to prepare a paper to present before the Society of Antiquaries of London. He chose as a subject for his paper the customs connected with All Souls' Day. After spending some time researching and gathering information, Halliburton realized that, as he put it, the coincidences in the observance of this festival by different nations were much more striking than I had supposed. As a result of this realization, he spent a great deal of his spare time over the next 9 years engaged in the investigation of the origin of various festivals and customs from around the world associated with the dates around late October to early November, and this research culminated in his 1868 paper. It was when he came to the conclusion of his preparations for the 1859 paper that Halliburton realized something that apparently made a very powerful impression upon him. He describes this realization in the introduction to his Festival of the Dead. A new and most startling fact was discovered when I came to read over the paper I had prepared. It was singular that the Festival of the Dead amongst the ancient Peruvians was celebrated on the same day as by the Spaniards. I had also considered this merely as a curious coincidence, but it was generally observed in November south as well as north of the equator, a fact so remarkable that it was evident that whatever could be the cause, it must be something hitherto unknown. Whatever that hitherto unknown something was that inspired this curious coincidence in regard to the universality of the Festival of the Dead, further researches revealed to Halliburton that the festival is now, or was formerly, observed at or near the beginning of November by the Peruvians, the Hindus, the Pacific Islanders, the people of the Tonga Islands, the Australians, the ancient Peruvians, the ancient Egyptians, and the northern nations of Europe, and continued for 3 days among the Japanese, the Australians, the ancient Romans, and the ancient Egyptians. Halliburton made an important conceptual leap when he further observed that it was evident that the uniformity could not have been caused or preserved by any calendar now known to us, and that the festival must originally have been regulated by some visible sign or mark that nature had supplied to our ancestors and the Peruvians. This could be the only rational conclusion, unless the uniformity of traditions was, in fact, only a coincidence. But if not coincidence, the question then begging to be answered is what could have been the visible sign or marks applied by nature to both the Peruvians and the Europeans? Halliburton questions, how was this uniformity in the time of observance preserved, not only in far distant quarters of the globe, but also through that vast lapse of time since the Indo-European first inherited this primeval festival from a common source? By invoking the idea of a common source, Halliburton is straying into controversial territory, not only during his time in the 1860s, but today still, for a common source implies diffusionism, a model of prehistory avoided by most modern scholarship because it is far too suggestive of a lost civilization. Halliburton referred to an unnamed old writer who asks, why do we suppose that the spirits of the dead are more abroad on Halloween than at any other time of the year? The answer to that question is full of implications. Clues are to be found in the various customs associated with this date and its celebrations. A pertinent similarity in the various traditions involved the lighting of torches and bonfires. Halliburton mentions the Halloween torches of the Irish, the Halloween bonfires of the Scotch, the Colcoith fires of the Welsh, and the Tyndall fires of Cornwall, lighted at Halloween, are clearly memorials of a custom found almost everywhere at the celebration of the Festival of the Dead. We find also that towards the end of October, the Hindu, like ourselves, have 3 days which are connected with the Festival of the Dead. In November took place the primeval Festival of the Dead, clad in a veil of Egyptian mythology. The Isia, the solemn mourning for the god Osiris, lasted for 3 days, and began at sunset like the Lemuria of the Romans, and the Festival of the Dead among the Persians and other nations. He learned that in Persia there was a festival of agriculture and death, and that in the ancient Persian calendar the month of this festival, November, was consecrated to the presiding angel of agriculture and death. He learned that in Peru the month corresponding to November was the month of carrying corpses. And in both cases, Halliburton remarks, the festival commenced in the evening with a Halloween, which was regarded as peculiarly sacred. He learned that in Ceylon a festival was held honoring the harvest home and a commemoration of the dead, and that it took place at the beginning of November. So, simply put, what Halliburton came to realize was that all over the world, in both hemispheres, cultures from ancient times down to the 19th century observed a comparable celebration of the dead and of the ancestors, with many details of these celebrations startlingly similar across time and geography. From the period beginning on October 23 to November 22, the sun is transiting through the sign of Scorpio. This sign has traditionally been associated with death. Obviously, in the northern temperate latitudes it is this sign in which the harvest occurs and the death, or dormancy of the plant kingdom comes to pass, both matters of life and death to an agriculturally based society. Scorpio is the zodiacal sign assigned to the 13th key of the major trumps of the tarot deck. Death. The imagery on this card relates directly to the symbolic meanings at the core of the ancient Festival of Dead. But what has this to do specifically with Halloween, or a Festival of the Dead? Here is where Halliburton's discoveries transcend mere academic interest, for in the course of his research he was led to a startling realization. As Halliburton relates, a remarkable fact was incidentally forced upon my attention. That the memory of the deluge was by the Mexicans, the Egyptians and the Jews associated with the same time of the year, and by the 2 latter nations as well as in Greece, and with that day I had found some very peculiar superstitions connected, in the Pacific Islands as well as among most ancient nations. Among the Aztecs as well as the Egyptians, the deluge was commemorated at the beginning of the year of the Pleiades, when that constellation culminated at midnight. This was indeed a remarkable fact. The memory of the deluge was associated with the same time of year and with the Pleiades by multiple cultures around the world over a time span of millennia. How could this be explained? As most semi-literate people now know, the story of a great world-destroying flood was by no means limited to the biblical story of Noah, but was prominent in some form or another all over the ancient world. What was the connection between the deluge tradition and the Pleiades? The answer to this question was provided by astronomer Stansbury Hagar in the year 1931. In a contribution to the journal Popular Astronomy for the August to September issue of that year, Hagar discussed traditions from pre-Columbian Mexico that had recently come to the attention of the academic world. Before the arrival of the first Spaniards in Mexico, over 400 years ago, and probably much earlier, the Mexicans told of certain stars called Zontimac or falling hairs, which fell from heaven to earth with the Lord of the Dead. Their fall was commemorated annually in the Quequeli festival, said to have been held towards the end of October. This festival, and the falling of the stars, was associated with the end of the world. The reference to falling stars associated with the end of the world couldn't be more blatant. We might recall that amongst the eyewitnesses to the Great Tunguska cosmic event of 1908 were many who believed that the end of the world was upon them. Hagar gives more details about the meaning of these traditions of ancient Mexico. The Lord of the Dead governed the festival of the dead preceding the Quequeli, during which the spirits of the dead were supposed to return to earth from the land of souls in the sky. No doubt they were believed to have been accompanied by their deity whose fall is mentioned in the ritual. I think most will have no difficulty seeing here a reference to a meteor shower. The imagery is powerful. The Lord of the Dead, accompanied by many other stars, falling to earth, is a very compelling representation of a meteor stream in association disintegrating comet. The end of the world would naturally be associated with the memory of one of the great meteoric showers during November, when all the stars seemed to fall from the sky. And many ancestors were lost. So, is it possible that this stream of cosmic debris was responsible for a major cosmic encounter event? Is it possible that such an encounter could have instigated human mass mortality? Is it possible that the memory of this event is preserved in the form of numerous festivals and observations from all over the ancient world commemorating the dead? Is it conceivable that this tradition still survives today in the form of Halloween? The threat of cosmic impact is very real. Our ancestors knew this, and the cosmos is constantly reminding us. Now this is something to think about while gathering candy and saying trick or treat. There seems to be no doubt that a cataclysmic event happened in our ancient past, and for some reason we forgot why we even commemorate.